In this public parking lot, we have a Ram truck, a Rubicon Jeep, we have a Ford Mustang, and we have a Jeep Wrangler. So in this activity, we want to look at how some of the angles that are formed by the parking lot lines are related. So this one line that runs in the middle of the parking lot, we can call it a transversal, and these other lines that cut and the same distance from each other, we can call them parallel lines. Now if these two lines are parallel, then certain angle relationships will hold for these angles here. Now the thing we are calling an angle is this rotation between one line and another. So for example, this rotation measured right here in degrees is called an angle that has been labeled as A. And you can see other angles B, C, D, P, Q, R, S. Now the first relationship that we are going to look at is the relationship between corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are congruent in this scenario. The word congruent is the word that is used to define equal angles in geometry. So instead of saying the angles are equal in measure, we say they are congruent. So, but then what are corresponding angles? Think about it this way for corresponding angles. If we were to get this intersection right here, if this intersection right here will look like this, then this will be A, B, C, D. So corresponding means if this intersection right here, this is A, B, C, D. So if I were to move this A, B, C, D and place it on these angles over here, then I see that the B will fall on Q. So B corresponds to Q. The A will fall on P, so A corresponds to P, and so on. So corresponding angles are congruent. That means the angles here that correspond to angles here will have the same measures. So in geometry, we will write this as, for the corresponding angles, we will write this as the measure of the angle A is congruent. Okay, this is a symbol for the word congruent. So congruent is written like this. This is a mathematical symbol for congruent. So the measure of the angle A, this M stands for measure, and this sign here means angle. Okay, so it's a little different from the less than sign because we make this upper arm longer. The measure of the angle A, it will be congruent to the measure of the angle P. Which other angles will be congruent? We will be congruent based on corresponding angles. We see that B here will be congruent to Q. Again, if we write it like this and we move it over here, B falls on Q. So we can place it right here to see them. So B corresponds to Q, so we write it here as measure of the angle B will be congruent to the measure of the angle Q. So those are corresponding angles. Now let's talk about adjacent angles. Adjacent angles. Going back to the parking lot, we can see that the Ford Mustang is adjacent to the Jeep Wrangler because they are side by side each other. The Ram is adjacent to the Rubicon G. So that makes the angle A here adjacent to the angle B. Okay, so adjacent angles will be, let's identify all the adjacent angles. So coming back here, so looking at, because this car is adjacent to this car, this angle is adjacent to this angle. So there is a property of the adjacent angles in this scenario. The adjacent angles are supplementary. Supplementary means they add up to 180 degrees. So adjacent angles add up to 180 degrees. So what we're saying here is that the measure of the angle A plus the measure of the angle B, because they are on the same straight line, they are adjacent to each other, they will add up to 180 degrees. And so will these other adjacent angles here add up to 180 degrees. The third relationship that we will look at in this scenario are vertical angles. So vertical angles are congruent. Vertical angles are congruent. Again, congruent means they have the same size. So the word for vertical is opposite. Okay, so when we look at the angle that are opposite, they will be straight across from each other. We see that the angle A is vertical across this intersection to the angle C. Okay, so because of that property, the angle A and the angle C have the same measure. Okay, so measure of the angle A is congruent to the measure of the angle C, because the reason is that they are vertical. We can also see that the angle D here is vertical to the angle B. So the measure of the angle D is congruent to the measure of the angle B because they are vertical. Alright, and this same property can be applied to these other corresponding angles here, so that P and R have the same measure, S and Q have the same measure. Okay, one more property that we're going to look at is the definition of acute angle and obtuse angle. So an acute angle is an angle that is less than 90 degrees. So here comes our protractor. To measure an angle, we place the protractor at the center of rotation where the angle starts. In this scenario, this angle is about 60 degrees. Here, because the angle Q is less than 90 degrees, Q is considered to be acute. So Q is an acute angle. Okay, P is an obtuse angle. Obtuse angles are bigger than 90 degrees. So if we were to measure the angle P, we see that it starts from 0, goes all the way to about a little more than 120 degrees. Okay, it starts from 0, goes all the way to a little more than 120 degrees. So it is bigger than 90, so it is obtuse. Okay, so this angle right here is obtuse. So by looking, we can tell that this angle here as well is obtuse, and we also know that they are vertical. This is acute, and we can always identify acute and obtuse angles in the same way. Thank you.